In today's video, I wanted to talk about James Harden, and just like the title says, really the evolution of his game and his playstyle throughout his career. And I think this is a really interesting topic, especially right now with the way that James Harden is playing with the Brooklyn Nets and how he's taking on a much different role than he did earlier in his career with the Houston Rockets during his prime, and also early in his career when he actually won a Sixth Man of the Year with the OKC Thunder, and really just the evolution of his game and how it's changed so drastically at times throughout his career. I find this a really interesting topic, and I wanted to go in depth with it today and show you guys some of the things about Harden's game throughout his career and how he's changing his game so much throughout his career is actually a good thing, and how he's actually matured as a player as he's gone on throughout his career and up to this point in his career with the Brooklyn Nets. Now, before I do start to get into the analysis of today's video, I just wanted to point out real quick that it turns out that in the last 28 days, 93.5% of you guys that are watching my videos aren't subscribed to this channel. I mean, I would understand if it was like 80 or 70%, but 93.5% of you guys aren't subscribed. If some of you guys, just a small percentage of those that aren't subscribed, just hit that subscribe button, we would easily be at 1,000 subscribers right now. So if you're watching this video and you're not subscribed to the channel yet, make sure you do hit that big red subscribe button, because it does help out the channel a lot. With that being said, let's get into the analysis now. So let's start off by talking about the early days of James Harden's career, where he played 3 seasons with the OKC Thunder, and this is when he was playing off of the bench and actually won a Sixth Man of the Year in 2012, like I mentioned. And this is when he was playing alongside Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook, and unfortunately this team came very close to winning a championship and unfortunately didn't get it. But it was really interesting. As a guy who really started watching the NBA in about 2014 or 2015, I came into a situation of watching James Harden with his dominant days with the Houston Rockets. So it's incredible to see that before this, he was actually more of a role player who spaced the floor a lot of the time, played off ball, moved off ball, and obviously Harden was not nearly as dominant as a player with the Thunder as he was in the later parts of his career, but he did have better aspects to his game. Like I said, he was probably a little bit of a better teammate. He was able to play in a little bit more situations, be more versatile, and play off the ball. And it's just so interesting to see how much his play style has changed from OKC to Houston, and I'll be talking about the Houston days very shortly as well. But Harden is only one of 2 players in NBA history to win the Sixth Man of the Year award alongside an MVP in his career. So it was definitely very interesting to see how much his game changed once he was traded to Houston and once he developed a little bit more as a player. And overall, when he was playing as a role player with OKC, Harden averaged 12.7 points per game over the 3-year span, 3.4 rebounds, 2.5 assists, and like I said, was really more of kind of a more efficient player, a little bit more catch and shoot and playing more on the perimeter. And overall, shooting wise, he shot 44.4% from the field, 37% from 3, and 83.5% from the free throw line. So probably overall a little bit of a slightly over average efficiency here from Harden. And as you can see, his role was pretty much in half of what it was later on in his career, as he was only taking 8.6 field goal attempts per game. About 4 of those were threes, and he also only took about 4.3 free throw attempts per game. So it was really interesting to see how early in Harden's career, he was really more of a role player that was playing off the ball a lot of the time. So then, as we know, Harden gets traded to the Houston Rockets in 2013, and in the first few years that he played with the Houston Rockets, maybe the first 1 or 2 years, he still had a little bit of those habits of being able to play off ball, be a little bit versatile, and be a pretty good playmaker at times. But then as his career went on with the Houston Rockets, he became this incredibly ball dominant player. And as many of us NBA fans know, this was in a way a very good thing for James Harden, because he was putting up historic statistical seasons. For example, winning the MVP in the 2018 season, averaging 36.1 points per game in the 2019 season, and then following that up by putting up 34.3 points per game in the 2020 season. And his incredible ISO game was just incredible to watch, but sometimes he was a little bit inefficient if he got cold, it wasn't going to work out for his team. And the fact that he was this ball dominant meant that he really wasn't able to get his team to a championship level, because he was really the only guy that had the ball in his hands. So throughout this 9-season period with the Houston Rockets, when the playoffs rolled around, when Harden was playing like an MVP caliber player, a lot of the time, as we know, he would get a lot of criticism because of how ball dominant his playstyle was, and how his playstyle really wasn't able to allow his team to get to the point where they were able to seriously contend for a championship. There would always be a good regular season team, but then as we know, you go to the playoffs, all of a sudden Harden starts seeing different defenses thrown at him, double teams constantly being thrown at him, and it's obviously a much different look for him, and he wasn't able to succeed this way at a high level as he was in the regular season during those dominant years with the Houston Rockets. But at the same time, like I said, this was just an incredible statistical period for Harden, as when he was playing with the Houston Rockets, he absolutely solidified himself as one of the best and most talented offensive players of all time. In the 9-year span, Harden averaged 29.5 points per game, along with 6 rebounds per game, and also 7.7 assists. But at the same time, with these assists came a lot of turnovers, as we know, Harden really throughout his entire career has been a very turnover prone player, and during his time with the Rockets averaged 4.4 turnovers per game, so he wasn't really close to getting that assist to turnover ratio up to 2-to-1, which as the primary point guard of a team, you've kind of got to get to that point. So Harden wasn't exactly a great playmaker when he was with the Houston Rockets, and mostly because of his extremely ball dominant play style, that was the case. And also, like I mentioned, at times he could be inefficient. Overall, pretty good efficiency from Harden, but they were definitely off nights for him, and at times, especially in the playoffs, he was pretty inconsistent. Overall, over the 9-year span in the regular season, shooting 44.3% from the field, 36.2% from 3, and 86.2% from the line, and obviously just insane amount of shots taken per game for Harden, nearly averaging 20 field goal attempts per game in the entire 9-year span with the Rockets, 9 three-pointers per game, as he was always taking those three-pointers off of the dribble, stepping back, using his ISO game, using his dribble moves, and taking a ton of step-back threes per game, which, like I said, at times was working, but at times it wasn't able enough to get them over that hump and contend for a championship. And then also he was getting to the line a ton and averaged 10.5 free throw attempts per game. So this was definitely a very interesting period for Harden, because it was definitely the prime of his career for him personally, but he definitely did get a lot of hate from the media as well, because he wasn't able to have his team success along with that personal success. So then it gets to the point where Harden's very upset with the Houston Rockets. He doesn't like the situation he's in, and he wants to leave, and he obviously requests a trade, sits out a few games, and eventually gets traded to the powerhouse Brooklyn Nets. Now, over the course of last season and the start of this season, the 2021 and 2022 NBA season, I've actually really been impressed with James Harden and how he's actually changed his entire play style to fit alongside the Brooklyn Nets, alongside Kevin Durant. And for last year, Kyrie Irving, obviously we know that this year Kyrie Irving hasn't played a game yet, but overall with Harden playing on the Brooklyn Nets, he's really taken on more of a role of being a pass first type of player, a facilitator, and his IQ for the game has gotten so much better, and he knows that his role on this team is not to isolate 20 times per game and chuck up step back threes all the time. He knows that he has to be more of that facilitator type of guy that plays pass first, and his assist numbers have gone up so much over the course of his time with the Brooklyn Nets, but at the time he still doesn't really have that same skill that he had with the Houston Rockets with his scoring ability. But at the same time, I just wanted to really make this video and bring this point to the table that James Harden is actually doing something very impressive here by changing his playstyle, because especially during this season so far in 2021 and 2022, a lot of fans across the NBA have thrown more and more criticism at Harden because he's quote-unquote washed, and in a way, I kind of agree with this, because he doesn't really have that same skill that he had with the Rockets, but his IQ for the game and his overall playmaking ability has just gotten so much better with the Brooklyn Nets, and this is what he does need to do on that team with Kevin Durant, because that's the role he needs to play. He's not the number one scoring option anymore, and I've just been so impressed with how Harden has matured as a player and realized that, first of all, this is the role he has to play on that team, and second of all, he just doesn't have the exact exact same skill that he had with the Houston Rockets when it comes to his scoring ability. With the Nets so far in last year combined with this year, he's averaging 23.3 points per game, which is still a very high number, and he can certainly still score the ball at a very high level, but definitely not the same as what he did with the Rockets. But he's also averaging much more rebounds and getting on the glass a lot more, averaging 8.3 rebounds per game, and bringing his assists per game up to 10.4 per game, while actually slightly lowering his turnovers as well, only having 4.2 turnovers per game. So this is certainly a much better assist to turnover ratio for Harden than it was with the Houston Rockets. And like I said, his ability to just have better court vision, better IQ, and mature as a player and know that he has to play pass first on this team is very impressive. And he actually has gotten slightly more efficient as well when it comes to his scoring, because he's not chucking up step back threes constantly. Overall with the Nets so far, shooting 46.1% from the field, 38% from three, and 85.3% from the line. And the stats definitely show that he is taking a step back when it comes to his scoring, as he's only averaging 16 field goal attempts per game so far in his career with the Nets, 7.5 3-point attempts per game, and only about 7 free throw attempts per game. And all of these are significantly down from what he was doing with the Houston Rockets when you compare them to those. So I think really overall my main point of this video is that when you look at the comparison between Rockets Harden and Nets Harden, it's definitely different, but it's not exactly worse in a way, because Harden's playing his role a lot better. And like I've said countless times now throughout the last few minutes of this video, his IQ and playmaking ability has just gotten so much better. And I think really as NBA fans, we just have to appreciate greatness here with Harden. It would be very easy as a fan, and I see the point of view from fans here, but a lot of fans, like I said, across the community will first of all criticize Rockets Harden for not having a play style that was good enough to lead the Rockets to a championship, and then at the same time criticize Harden because he's washed with the Houston or with the Brooklyn Nets now and not scoring as much. So I think really the approach that as fans we have to take to this is just look at how Harden has actually done an incredible job with the Houston Rockets, putting up nearly 30 points per game with his tenure with them, but then also praise him for knowing what he needs to do to change his play style when he moves to the Brooklyn Nets and become really more of a team player and improve his playmaking ability. So there you have it. That's all I've got for you guys analysis wise in today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video, and overall, like I said, the message is to really appreciate the greatness of James Harden. He will go down as one of the most talented offensive players we've ever seen, and overall probably a top 20 or top 25 player of all time in NBA history when his career is over. And I really haven't seen a player in NBA history have their play style change this much drastically when moving team to team, from going to a role player to one of the most dominant ISO scorers ever, and then become one of the best playmakers in the game. So that's why I wanted to make today's video. I really just found the evolution of Harden's game very interesting, and like I said, we do need to appreciate just how good of an offensive player he's been throughout his career and how he has adapted to his new role with the Brooklyn Nets. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Feel free to leave your comments down below on your thoughts on James Harden and his new role with the Brooklyn Nets over the last year or so. Thank you guys for watching. Like I said, make sure you hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you all next video.